I have a proposition for you. I can offer you death in a retirement home fairly soon because you are so close to death. Or you can join the space army and fight aliens and probably die in the next 10, 15 years anyway because they're super dangerous. Hello and welcome back. My name is Sean, and today we're diving into Old Man's War, Book 1 of John Scalzi, his debut novel. So a bit of channel lore. When I originally decided that I wanted to make a YouTube channel that revolved around sci-fi and fantasy and books and such, this was the first book that I have read and decided to do a review on. But with that being my very first effort, you thought that my first videos like Hyperion were bad. Well, this one never saw the light of day, but I had all the notes on it and I was going through my bookshelf and saw it sitting there and figured, why not just do that review now that I have done this a little bit more and figured out a bit more of how to just put everything together. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. So, getting into the specifics of this book, if you don't want to hear any minor spoilers whatsoever, I won't be diving into any major plot points or anything. If you like We Are Bob, We Are Legion, you'll like this book. It's a very fun, quick read. The pacing's great. The humor is great. I'd put it like a sci-fi beach read. You know, you could read it in a full sitting if you want to. I think I got through it in like 1 or 2 days, and that's like me just casually reading it. So very fun, very engaging. It is a debut for John Scalzi, and I think it does suffer some problems come with being a debut entry. If you're not looking for a critical sci-fi masterpiece that will make you think so much, it's a simple concept, I think executed very well. And having read a few books into the series, I think that if you like this, then you'll like the rest of the books because they consistently get better and better, and some of these issues I have found in this book absolutely get cleared up in the later books. But for everyone else, getting into some minor spoilers, I really like this. I thought that the humor on this was on point, even if that was a little bit overbearing at times, and I think undercut some of the messaging that he was trying to overlay in this book. John Scalzi has a great writing sense of humor and some of the prose, and the fact that I read this 7 months ago and it's still very much memorable, certain lines, certain scenes, means that it has a lot of staying power. In the last year or so, I have gone through about 60 to 80 books, and not all of them actually stick in my head. Some of them are like okay and I enjoy them during the time of reading, but actually having to recall and think about what that book was about and even pulling specific lines out of it, this book, it just instantly super memorable. Now, diving into specifics about what I like, the humor is definitely high up there. Everybody is witty. You have quips for everything. Some of the things they do with the military, just little one-off jokes, are very well executed. And the prose in general, I thought, was very well done. Even the very first line in the book, it was just quick. It catches your attention and it keeps you hooked in as you're going through the book. So just sheer, hey, I want to read something fun and just that keeps me engaged and I don't have to think about, it's really good. The other was some of the ideas and topics that were executed in here. This is a minor spoiler, but one more of a premise of the book itself is that we find that humanity isn't the only alien species out there. We are finally able to explore into space, and we quickly realize that while yes, there are aliens, oh shit, we're very much behind and the universe has a very finite amount of resources, and if we want humanity to survive, we better start colonizing as quick as possible. Now, this is going to be a series theme that will improve upon later, but for this book itself, you are getting to experience all of this through a lowly grunt in the space infantry. And so having that concept and having everything experienced through the humor and wit of that one character, it's a lot of fun. And while we don't dive into the specifics of most of the technology, seeing some of that technology laid in there was very innovative and very cool. It's always interesting when you start doing these sci-fi books and trying to imagine what would be possible if we made certain advances, and I think John Scalzi explored a lot of those very well. Even the general premise of the way they recruit in this book. Now, this is a minor spoiler, but the army will recruit directly from these nursing homes, and you're basically given a chance where like, hey, you're about to die in a retirement home and you're now finally now a senior citizen. It's like, how would you like to not die in that nursing home and instead go fight in this army? And that's an interesting concept, especially given the fact that we are losing the war. So the reason why we even have this was like these people have lived full lives anyway. So with our technology, we can give them a second chance. But hey, if they die, and they most likely will, then at least they've had a full life to really enjoy, and we're not really exploiting the youth. So I like that concept in general. It's very innovative in the fact that you're not just sending 18-year-olds out to war, but instead people that have had full-on life experiences. It was very humorous and engaging. And some of the scenes that we have in there, when you have like, hey, here's a bunch of 70, 80-year-olds that had that slow decline of their health and everything else, and then just throwing them in a superhuman, super athletic body was just cool concept, and definitely leads into some hijinks later on. Now, getting into some of the dislikes, and a lot of this is going to tie somewhat into the likes, and it's kind of like the drawback to some of the likes. The humor in this book actually undercuts a lot of what I think the author was trying to achieve. Because John Scalzi was trying to inject so much humor and personality into this book, I think he wound up overriding a lot of the characters. So for me, reading it, when they're trying to get you to attach to certain characters that will die later on in the book, because everything was so one note, and it was almost like that main character could have been talking to himself, or everyone was quipping and having the same general theme and feel, it really didn't really have much of an impact when someone would go and die, because there was no real uniqueness to the characters. Yes, you had different circumstances, but everyone's dialogue was pretty similar, and because we had so much humor laid on there, I think it just took away from some of the more emotional moments that the author may have been trying to achieve. This is something he absolutely gets better with in later books, so I think that this was just the debut. While most of it's good, it just definitely takes away from what could have been better. And at the end of the day, one of the major themes of this book is the horrors of war. So if everyone's wisecracking and just joking around, and while yes, soldiers do have a very gallows sense of humor, and that is absolutely a survival mechanism. You can have soldiers joking around, you can show that like grim humor in the face of that adversity, but if everyone is cracking jokes all the time and that is all you see, then that's going to negatively affect the impact of what you're trying to do. Now, with the whole war thing, because I would classify this as a military sci-fi book, I think one of the weakest parts of this book has to do with how the action's actually written. I didn't find it that engaging. We have all this cool technology, we have all these like unique alien races, but when we actually get to execute the action, it wasn't bad per se, but it didn't stand out and it wasn't great. Like I mentioned earlier with the We Are Bob, We Are Legion, the focus of that was more on the technology and some of these concepts, and that book isn't a military sci-fi. So the action in that book, I would say, is pretty similar to the action in this book. So some of the things that you think that were being done or that were considered, revolutionary by the main character should have been there in the first place, and that was probably one of the weakest parts of this. It does get better later on in the series, but I would never recommend the series if someone's looking for a hardcore, action-packed sci-fi book. It's not really what it's good at, and I think in this book it's at the weakest of the series. It's not bad, just for this genre there are a lot better examples of what it could be done, and especially in the whole military sci-fi fantasy genre, some are done very well. And lastly, this is just a personal thing I very much didn't like, but as we were introducing so much technology and things, you have to be very careful about what will and will not break plot congruence. One of the things that was introduced was the warp drive, and I think this is just like a rookie mistake, but he went too much into detail, I think, trying to sell how realistic this technology is. You can give a little bit of detail and it's fine if you can provide enough to make you think there's more there. When you start explaining like technology and magic systems to a certain level and just digging deeper and deeper, you can absolutely dig yourself into a hole. In this case, the warp drive, the way they had to say that they were using it to travel faster than light and showing up almost instantaneously in new locations, was that you would basically hop from one universe to another. Now, the big problem with this is that if you're constantly hopping into a new universe to actually show up and fight, then you're fighting in a new universe, and every military action that you've taken is essentially useless every time you hop universes, because you're not fighting in the same reality anymore. Now, later on in the series, this gets walked back, but when I read it, I stopped, I reread it, trying to make sure I understood what was happening, went to Reddit, tried to figure out if I was misreading it, and later on, it was like, oh, we don't actually understand how this works very well, so that was kind of like, wink, wink, don't look too much into this, but whenever you see something that glaring, it just completely like ruins your immersion, and up until that point, the pacing and humor and everything else was so good that having that just break me out of like oh man, I can't wait to finish this, to like, wait, what is this doing? Biggest criticism, doesn't happen again in the next few books, but it is something that you have to be worried about when you're writing hard magic systems and diving into more of the harder types of sci-fi technology, is that there are people like me who do focus on that stuff, and being a part of the Cosmere and seeing just how detailed some of these authors can get with their explanations and logic, you need to be very careful, because those are areas that people very much pay attention to. All in all, I liked it. It's a fun read. It's a debut novel, but for a debut, I think it has a lot of charm, and the series had a lot of potential. Now, I've only read up till the third or fourth book, and while very interesting, I wasn't really sucked in to see what was happening with the rest of the series. I will probably revisit that sometime, but I can say that the first 3 books at least are very enjoyable to read, and if you're just looking for something fun, light, with a lot of humor injected into it, absolutely check it out. If you like We Are Bob, like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be up your alley. I will be doing reviews on the next 2 of them sometime. I just figured this was something I could knock out pretty quickly and try to build up a backlog. I'm actually moving in the next few weeks. I'm not sure when I'll even release this video, so maybe I will already have moved, but trying to make sure we don't have any gaps in what my release schedule actually is. Anyway, I definitely recommend it. I'll put a link down in the description so you can go check it out. But as always, thanks for watching, and take it easy.